So, starting with science as attire.
Cool.
The post starts out with a summary, not a summary, a quick mention to X-Men. And this is like always a timeless reference for any geeks, but the X-Men movie had just came out recently, so this was something that like anyone in the general American culture would have gotten, even if they weren't a geek. So
Do you remember the opening to the 2001 X-Men with Patrick Stewart's voice over like that neuron little flying sequence with the credits? It's
No.
just like mutation. It's the core of evolution. And sometimes it causes radical. I forget what it was, but
Okay.
it was exactly this thing that he's talking about,
Cool.
and it was memorable at the time that he wrote this, and it's timeless, like you said. So
Yeah. So as everyone is familiar, you can have a mutation and that gives you superpowers. And one of those potential superpowers is Storm's ability to control lightning.
the quote that I remembered from this post before even having to reread it was, if one generation of mutation could cause a human being to be able to generate and throw lightning from their fingertips, that would outright falsify the theory of evolution.
Yes.
And like it's one of those
It's followed by the line, it would be worse than finding rabbit fossils in the Precambrian.
yes. And that was one of Stephen Jay Gould's like comebacks from like, how would you falsify evolution? This is obviously one of those bullshit theories, and he just mumbles into the microphone, or like kind of grumbles into the microphone. He's like, fossilized rabbits in the Precambrian. And it's like, yes, like that.
He did his voice pretty well there.
I did Richard Dawkins' impression of his voice. I didn't actually see Stephen Jay Gould do it.
okay.
I'm not even 100% positive.
Oh, was it Gould?
What did I say?
Oh, it may have been Gould, but the voice you did, I thought I heard Sagan in there.
Oh, I wish.
Okay.
No, yeah. In any case, I forget if it was Gould or whoever Dawkins was quoting, but I remember that quote third hand. So that's why the rabbits thing was also timely, because this was in the era of New Atheism books and all that stuff. So
Yeah. He points out that X-Men comics use terms like evolution, mutation, and genetic code purely to place themselves in what they conceive to be the literary genre of science, which is something we mentioned last episode too. And Eliezer says, the part that scares me is wondering how many people, especially in the media, understand science only as a literary genre.
yeah, he says that probably an actual majority of the people who believe in evolution use the phrase "because of evolution" because they want to be a part of the scientific in crowd. Belief as attire, like wearing a lab coat.
Exactly. And this is, whenever I see those like I fucking love science Facebook groups or whatever, this is exactly what I think of.
Yeah, and I remember conversations with people like in college and high school who would say things like this, and they would argue, basically the same people that were like in the era that I was in, like just coming out of like how much fun it is to argue with religious people, and they would throw evolution talking points out, but they didn't understand what they were arguing in defense of, and it doesn't make them. They happened to be right, but they were really just arguing for their side, and they weren't arguing. They were arguing for the truth. It's hard to, like, what do you call it if somebody is doesn't really know what they're talking about, but is arguing for the right thing and using the right words. It's
Lucky?
false knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lucky is another great word for it.
I saw the best troll in the world recently. I think it was posted on our Discord. Someone says whenever he has meetings with philosophers over Zoom, he uses a fake background that's a picture of his current background, so that the philosophers will have true, justified beliefs that happen to be false.
Yeah, it's
Or that happen to be not real information or
right,
something.
based on information that isn't real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, only a philosopher would care, and that's just perfect trolling.
The epistemic status of that person's background is shakily founded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yes, the belief as a tire thing, this is more of like a setup for other things, but it's an important point that a lot of people, I don't know, just care about looking like they're in the right group rather than really knowing stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, from a purely consequentialist point of view, it's like great as long as you're doing the right thing. Like I'd rather, as long as part of your belief as a tire means voting for the right things, or I don't know, advocating the correct policies.
I disagree entirely, because then they're like we just said, they're lucky, right? Like I also fucking love science, and I really hope that the people who fucking love science really do fucking love science, so that they can incorporate actual evidence and changing knowledge into their worldviews. But I get the feeling the vast majority of them happen to fucking love science because it supports their current view. And if the science were to shift, they would be like, oh, well, fuck those scientists, all making me angry and shit, and just not follow those things anymore. And I would much rather someone have an actual true belief, desire for true beliefs, and let them take let them.
I see what you're saying. I would rather have that too.
Yeah.
But if I don't get that,
Mm.
then at least have them rather. I'd rather have. I'd rather have soldiers on my side, even if they don't know why that's the right side to be on. Right? Now, don't get me wrong. That's a bad way to look at the world. That I wish the world wasn't that way.
Yeah.
But in this tortured analogy, since our votes are soldiers, or since our votes are bullets, I'd rather them be shooting the right way. Like I would love for my people to know what they're doing and why, and have the right motivations,
Yeah.
and the more the merrier. But if it's not going to be everybody, and like some of them are going to just do it just to impress their friends or something, like great, cool, I'll take what I can get.
No, I would rather have people voting against me, but who at least think that they're voting for the right reasons and actually be concerned about the truth, because those are people that I am confident would switch over to the right side if you could show them the truth, like with evidence and with argumentation. And like that is something that reality doesn't budge on. If there is a correct side, it is there to be found, and eventually either I'll go to their side or they'll come to my side, but the side will be right. Whereas the people who happen to be right and are recruiting science for their side as soldiers, that's great, but if it turns out that they're wrong, you aren't going to convince them. They will not stick to the truth. They just want you to vote their way. Like I think if you're not going with something empirical, like provable positions to decide how you vote, what are you deciding by? Are you deciding how to vote because of who your in-group is, or who has, the sexiest celebrity endorsements, or who has the greatest force of guns on their side? Because those are all things that I don't want to be the focal point of the battlefield. I don't want to fight over who has the sexiest celebrities, or who has the most guns, or who can most marshal, hatred or passion on their side. I want the fight to be over who can prove the truth of the matter.
I do too. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying I'll take what I can get right now. In an ideal world, that sounds perfect. But it's kind of like,
It's short-term thinking.
I am short-term thinking right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like right now stretching again the analogy more. We're at war now.
With who?
The wrong the people advocating for wrong ideas.
Will we still be at war in 50 years?
I sure hope not. But like right now, we need feet on the battlefield.
See, I think we've been at war for at least 100 years, maybe longer, and so I'd much rather have the weapons on our side that will have the correct side winning 50 years from now, as opposed to just winning right now in the short term and assuming this will not come up again.
Well, we'll keep indoctrinating them while they keep fighting. All right. That's we're getting away from the post.
We are, sorry.
No, you're good.
Damn it!
It's a good
mind
aside.
killed again.
No, that's fine. Eliezer goes on to say, I encounter people who are quite often willing to entertain the notion of dumber than human artificial intelligence, or even mildly smarter than human artificial intelligence. Introduce the notion of strongly superhuman artificial intelligence, and they'll suddenly decide it's pseudoscience. And it's not that they think that they have a theory of intelligence which lets them put a calculated theoretical upper bound on the power of an optimization process. Rather, they strongly associate superhuman AI to the literary genre of apocalyptic literature, where an AI running a small corporation associates the literary genre of Wired magazine.
Right. Which is, now you see the flaw inherent in your system, right? If you have people associating with what they believe to be, science and lab coats and the attire of science, then if someone makes the argument, hey, this AI thing, we don't know what the upper limit of an optimization process is, but we think it might be much smarter than humans, and now suddenly they're not on your side because they're like, oh, that's just apocalyptic fiction. That's not real science.
So
I don't fucking love apocalyptic fiction.
And yes, and I fully own the flaw of my thinking. Like I said, this isn't like what I advocate. This is where I think we are now. Like if Bill Gates wanted to give $1 billion towards safe AI research, and he wanted to do it to signal to all of his friends how smart he was, or because like, hey, look, I'm very forward thinking or something. I don't care why he's doing it. I care that, hey, good things are happening. Like right now, he's on the track to cure, like to solve the malaria problem on Earth, right? if he does that, I don't care if he's doing it just to, uh, for the social esteem. I don't care if he's doing it because he lost a bet. If he does it, awesome.
But do you think that's why he's doing it?
I think he's doing it because he cares.
Right.
Yeah.
He actually is convinced by both compassion and the science.
Right.
Which is why it's fortunate that we have people who are actually convinced by science. Whereas if all he wanted to do was look good to his followers, he would fund like more pre-K education or something.
Have you ever met like an aesthetic vegetarian?
What is an aesthetic
Like
vegetarian?
someone who doesn't eat meat because it's icky?
Oh,
Like just the idea of like, oh, just ripping into an animal with my teeth just feels gross.
I think so.
So like,
Sort of.
I feel like a vegetarian is on the
No,
right side of the moral fence on what to eat.
Yeah.
And if they're not eating meat for what to me don't sound like good reasons, like I don't really care. I think you're doing the right thing. Granted, I eat meat. I'm a hypocrite. I was vegetarian for years and fell off the wagon and never found it again.
So if the aesthetic vegetarian at some point got over their grossness of meat and was like, oh, this is pretty good, and started eating meat, how would you feel about that?
Oh, bummer, we lost a troop.
Really?
I mean, what else would I feel?
Well, because you eat meat.
Right. I'm not.
So you
I'm a
don't care
hypocrite.
that much.
Right. I
Okay.
suck.
I'm not saying you suck.
No,
I'm
I'm
just
fu-
saying you don't care that much.
I don't.
But you kind of care more about the extinction of the human species, I assume.
Yeah.
Okay, so the
I'm also
whole AI thing
I act
might...
I act just as much in favor of that like verbalized preference as I do about my meat eating thing though.
Yeah, okay.
I do basically fuck all to save the world. Like it would be nice to do more.
You help spread the word.
I help spread the word. I donate a little money.
You should probably kind of keep it on the down low that you're a hypocrite, though,
I-
while spreading the word.
Well, I remember my parents telling me not to smoke.
Mm-hmm.
They've both been smoking and still smoke for 40 years. I don't know how old they are.
Mm-hmm.
So like, they're right. They're like, don't smoke; it's bad for you.
Yeah.
The fact that they're saying that, whilst holding a cigarette doesn't make their statement wrong.
Okay.
It means that they
have an addiction.
yeah, and it means that they don't seem to believe what they're saying enough to actually do anything about it. Granted, eating meat and not donating enough to Miri isn't an addiction. So there's
Depends on how you define enough. You know?
there's a weakness of analogy there, but like, what have I done in my advocacy for like animal
What I'm
health?
saying is, if Bill Gates did not care about science and believing things that were true, do you think he ever would have gone the route of donating money to AI safety?
Probably not.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And I hear what you're saying. And on a quick aside, I eat way less meat than I did 10 years ago.
Oh.
Actually, no, 10 years ago I was a vegetarian. 15 years ago.
Okay.
And I make an effort to buy like well-sourced things that I do eat.
Cool.
So I don't know. Like I'm doing. It's one of the like. I also don't believe in like ethical black and whites. Like if you're, I don't know. So if you're donating to charity, for example, you should be doing what Will McCaskill and Steven Pinker or Steven. Wait, why am I blank? Jesus, he wrote Animal Liberation. All animals are equal.
Believe it's Steven Pinker.
No.
No.
Peter Singer.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, who was Steven Pinker?
He wrote The Rise and Fall, or the Better Angels of Our Nature.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
No, we're good. Like Peter Singer and Will McCaskill both live at like the comfortable poverty level. I think Will McCaskill I know he's like the youngest tenured professor, I think, at Oxford. So whatever you have to make to live in Oxford, I think he lives on the equivalent of like 36,000 pounds a year, and then he donates the rest. And like, that's great. And if we buy what he says, which I do, we should all be doing the same thing. What I do instead is donate a tiny fraction and realize that I'm doing much better than I would be otherwise, and better than most people.
Yeah.
So like, it's not necessarily about doing everything all the way.
It's about pushing that Overton window.
Yeah, and so like, if you're concerned about animal well-being and you like eating meat, maybe do 1 day a week where you don't eat meat. And this maybe will transfer in today's topic. Like this isn't, again, like a kind of thing where I can point to the sequence where I got this lesson, but like, actually I kind of can, except it was a Scott Alexander post.
I think there was a sequence post that was of the, I don't remember what the exact term was, but it was the "Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good."
Perfect. Yeah. So, all right. Maybe that was something I internalized without realizing it. But you can do better without having to shame yourself for not doing perfectly.
Yeah.
And while we're on the note of the sequences, I'll keep pushing through this one.
Okay.
Basically, we've kind of hit this one. Like the people who dismiss super AI but not standard AI aren't speaking from within a model of cognition. They don't realize they need a model. They don't realize that science is about models.
Yeah.
They're just hearing this and they've got it in their head as
I love that line. That's really damning.
yeah. And
They don't realize they need a model.
yeah. It's damning only within like the social sphere who has the vernacular to like get why that's a sick burn.
Yeah.
To the rest of them, it's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. What do you mean models? I got a train set at home, you know.
I think that's like, I mean, the namesake of less wrong. That's kind of the whole point of the Bayesian rationality movement, right? Is to make our models be less wrong over time.
Right.
Because more accurate models are better in every way for anything you want to do.
And that's, yeah, man, that sounds like a great like way to end the like core part of our episode. Is like the goal is to be less wrong. So what do you do to do that? And it's like, yeah, you make incremental steps. And it's not about perfection.
Mm-hmm.
It's the goal is perfection,
Mm-hmm.
but the path there is to be a little more accurate whenever you can.
Yeah.
So anyway,
All right. Our next post is fake causality. And it starts out talking about phlogiston. Have we talked about the phlogiston thing before?
you know, this is going to be episode 11 or something, or 110.
Mm-hmm.
That puts us at like 4 years almost.
Okay.
My answer is that's my long-winded way of saying I have no idea.
Okay.
Probably.
I think we have, but if we haven't, I'll give a quick recap for people who aren't familiar. I could have sworn there was an earlier sequence about this, but maybe not. Phlogiston was the medieval alchemical equivalent of the Greek elemental fire. It is how they explained what fire is. The examples given in the post are that when you burn wood, it turns to ash because the hot, orangey, burny stuff is phlogiston leaving the wood, and the ash that remains is, the original true material of what would be once the phlogiston is removed. And if you started burning something in a sealed container, eventually it would stop burning because the air became saturated with phlogiston and couldn't hold anymore, so it couldn't leave the wood anymore. That kind of thing. And he points out that phlogiston was a fake explanation. It didn't actually explain anything at all. The question is, what is the hot, glowy thing that happens when you burn something? And the answer is, that's phlogiston. Like, oh yeah, okay. It's within stuff, and then it gets released and goes to other stuff. And like, oh, all right, but it doesn't actually explain anything at all because your answer is basically a sequence of syllables that points at the thing you were asking about in the first place. It doesn't give you any ability to predict things, any ability to extend this knowledge into other areas.
It's less of a model and more of like a sticker you put on that part of your map.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, how do you do that? Magic. That's not an explanation.
Yes. How do you do it? Phlogiston. Oh.
Yeah. And to the right mind, you look at that answer and you're like, that's not a fucking answer. So unfortunately, and this is something as a relevant aside, anyone should who has the least bit of like inclination to do so, read any book on like the history of science. I recommend I'm blanking on the author's name. It's A Brief History of Nearly Everything. Okay. And it's just a summary of how we came to know what we know. The history of plate tectonics, the history of how we know the earth is round, how we know the core is made of molten iron. Like all these things are stuff that I believe, but I haven't directly observed plate tectonics. Right. A friend of mine was in an earthquake a few weeks ago, but like, who knows what's causing that?
That could have been one of those angry gods.
Yeah, one of those
Vulcan, right?
phlogiston things. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
So I know using phlogiston as a placeholder. I realize that's not what it was used for in the past. The takeaway from it that's really mind blowing is like all the stuff that we were taught in elementary school about like the basic facts of the universe are really, really new discoveries in the history of our species.
Yeah.
Like
there's people in living memory, or there's people still alive right now that had to be convinced plate tectonics exists.
In the original version of Carl Sagan's Cosmos, it talked about how we don't know what killed the dinosaurs.
Oh, really?
When they re-released it in like 1990 something,
okay.
They updated it a bit because it was in the mid to late 80s that the understanding the understood fact of the meteorite impact knocking them out was widely accepted.
Oh shit.
Like, this sounds like a thing that we've known for hundreds of years, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, asteroid meteorite killed the dinosaurs. Like, we've all always known that, but we have not all always known that. Your parents weren't taught that in school.
Well, I'll be damned.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah. So like that sort of reflection, and then you look back on, oh, so you hear about the dumb things people were doing 300 years ago. You wonder how could they possibly have been so dumb? It's like, because no one had the faintest idea what was going on for the longest time.
Yeah.
And even now, I mean, we've got a great idea. I hate to be like one of those people like, oh, the universe is still so unknown. It's such a mystery. There's plenty of cool mysteries out there to find, and there's lots of unknowns. We have a much stronger idea now than we've ever had in the past, and we've got a pretty good fucking idea. Like, the standard model of physics is not going to be completely thrown. It's not going to be completely wrong, right?
It's going to be adjusted.
Right.
Might be superseded by like a deeper knowledge, but it's still going to be a damn good approximation. Like Newtonian mechanics is still a wonderful approximation of physics for anything on the human scale.
Right. And, if you're doing chemistry, you're totally fine working with like the Bohr model, but like atoms are not little ping pong balls.
Yeah.
And when you're a theoretical physicist, it's a whole different landscape. But if you're to this, if you're wondering what'll happen when you're pouring a little oil on the pasta noodles that you're cooking to make it stop boiling or something, you don't need to be a theoretical physicist thinking about the wave function of what's happening at the quantum scale of it. It's like, you just need to know, oh yeah, oil dissipates the surface tension and does something else. I'm not clearly don't cook either, so.
Right. I don't know what you're talking about. What is this oil that you speak of?
Can't you pour a little vegetable oil on boiling water to keep it from like going completely nuts and boiling over?
I have no idea because I do not cook. Like I said, I literally have no idea what you're talking about right now.
Well, this is an empirical question. I'll get back to you guys in a couple weeks.
Okay.
All right.
But the point he makes is that phlogiston was widely accepted for a very long time because fake explanations don't feel fake, and that's what makes them dangerous. And I don't know if any of our listeners used to be religious. I was as a child, and it just felt like a fact of the universe that the supernatural beings exist. None of it ever felt fake at the time because you don't realize.
Yeah, I've used this analogy before that, like, when I was a kid, I believed in like, my parents are vaguely religious to the point I couldn't even tell you what flavor of Christianity they are, if they have one. So I believed the vague facts of the Bible, just like I kind of believed that Japan existed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd never been there. I'd seen it on a map, but I'd seen pictures of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's like, oh yeah, I'll take your word for it. And it just falls into the same truth bucket in my head as everything else. Yeah. I don't know at what age I started putting together a probably bullshit bucket and a definitely bullshit bucket, or a definitely probably bullshit bucket. But like, everything just kind of everything as a kid just went into that same like belief, add this to the things of things, Yeah.
I used to think that men had one less rib than women.
And yeah, because
that's not a fake explanation. That's just a fake belief. But a fake explanation is kind of the same way.
Yeah, like a fake explanation is like it seems like it's an answer, but it's not really. Right. And when you realize that you can't make a new prediction off of this explanation, it doesn't tell you anything. Yeah. It's an answer to a multiple choice question on a test. It's a lot like a password, but it's in many cases, or I guess in the case of fake explanations, it's actually worse than a password because it's actually wrong. Yeah. And the problem is that sometimes it feels like it's knowledge because you don't most of the time many people are running around, they don't realize that they need some working cohesive model of how things are supposed to fit together.
Well, I mean, phlogiston makes the fire hot. That's knowledge, right?
It feels like knowledge. Yeah. I can say that as a sentence. And if you ask me what does phlogiston do, I could say it makes stuff hot, right? So it feels like knowledge. Yeah. But when I ask you, all right, well, when I finish burning this pile of wood, will it weigh more or less than it did before I started burning it? Based on your phlogiston theory, what do you anticipate?
That depends on whether phlogiston has positive or negative weight, I guess.
Well, you're the phlogiston expert. You tell me, right?
I would have to guess that it would weigh less because everything has weight, right?
Well, is phlogiston going in or out? Is the other question.
No, phlogiston's going out because the ash is what wood would be like without phlogiston in it.
Okay.
So the ash would weigh less than the wood.
All right. Well, so then, which I'm actually not sure if ash does weigh less than wood or not. I think typically weighs less depending on what you burn.
Okay.
Wood I think weighs less because you're releasing the hydrocarbons when you're burning it, but like you're leaving some of the other stuff. I forget what wood's made of. It's been a while since I've taken a science class.
I mean, I could see wood weighing less just because a lot of it is blown out, typically, as cinders and ash and stuff that get carried out. But
And all the water in it will evaporate when it's being burned too.
yeah, that's true. Any water that's left in it. But generally, isn't oxidization the process of adding oxygen to something?
Exactly. So like I think if you burn a magnesium strip, it'll weigh more afterwards. So like phlogiston theory wouldn't predict that.
Right.
Phlogiston is stuff leaving the system, not entering it.
Yeah.
It doesn't explain why when you cover a candle, it goes out. Like if you put a lid on a candle with like a
No,
candle
it
in a jar.
did explain it because the air became saturated phlogiston and couldn't hold anymore. It's not something you would have predicted beforehand,
Right.
but since they knew that's what happened,
They fit the explanation to fit the model.
yeah.
Which is science backwards, which
Right.
gets you fucked up.
Yeah, that's near the end of the post says, thanks to hindsight bias, it's not enough to check how well your theory predicts facts you already know. You have to predict for tomorrow, not yesterday.
I like that. That's a good takeaway quote too. So many of these are good bumper stickers.
Yes.
Or, maybe not bumper stickers because that's not going to entertain anyone on the road. But a lot of these are just great little sound bites.
I think
You have to predict for tomorrow, not yesterday. I mean, sounds like a tautology, but like it's not how most people run around all the time, right?
right.
They say, I totally saw that coming.
Yeah.
Not, could you told me that yesterday?
Yeah.
Right?
No. Not can you tell me tomorrow what will happen? Because if you asked, could you have told me that yesterday? They would have said, yeah, of course I would have told you that yesterday.
Right, yeah. I said it backwards.
Yeah. The real question is, can you tell me what's going to happen tomorrow? Cool. All right. So those were our 2 posts for today. And boy, did we get off on a tangent, but hey, it was fun.
That's why we're here.
Exactly.
If we stayed on topic and didn't like ramble a bit, these episodes would be 90 or 60 minutes long.
And
like,
some people would be like, oh, thank God, please, please give us shorter episodes.
we're a bi-weekly podcast. We can ramble a bit.
That's true. And it's more fun for us, which is also important because we're the ones that have to come back and do this every couple of weeks.
Yeah, if this wasn't fun, we wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
But speaking of fun things to look forward to in the next fortnight, we are doing 3 posts. Brace yourselves, not 2. We're doing
Oh.
3 because they fit together real well. We're doing semantic stop signs and the famous mysterious answers to mysterious questions and the futility of emergence,
Huzzah.
which I'm looking forward to. Those are all great. This is all part of, I think, the map and territory sequence, which is the one that I remember reading first
Okay.
and having just, this was like all the this is so cool moment for me. And then afterwards you're still reading and learning, but this was the
This was the really big.
this was the first Iron Man movie.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is awesome. And then you're getting more awesome, but like this is the first ride up, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, this is the 0 to 1 change.
Yes.
As who was that, Teal or Musk that said that? I think that was Musk, right? The difference going from 0 to 1 is drastically more difference than from going 1 to 2.
That's a good quote, but I couldn't give you the attribution.